Hello everyone, and thanks for coming back to the channel. Today we're taking a look at the SkyStars Piper 105. The flight controller is the Kramon F411 with the MPU 6000, and it also has a 15 amp 4-in-1 ESC. VTX is a power switchable VTX from 25 milliwatts all the way up to 400 milliwatts. Runcam Nano 2 FPV camera, featuring 1103 8000 kV motors, and 65 millimeter props, and they are really flexible. Does come with the Cheapo Depot battery strap. I added the Cheapo Depot battery pad. Comes with a battery pad of its own, a set of yellow props, as well as stickers. It weighs just over 50 grams. I flew it on 3S G&B 520 milliamp batteries, which brings our weight up to just about 93 grams. I am getting about 105 millimeters motor post to motor post. Bottom carbon plate is 2 millimeters thick. So I've had this for quite a while. It seems like I'm saying that time and time again. The fact of the matter is I just don't do things quickly. But the one thing that you're going to notice right away is look at all that bobble. Look at all the bobble in that camera. Now the reason why I've had this so long is when I have gotten some outside flights, I've always tried to take this out with me to work on the tune. Now if you're listening to it, you probably don't hear anything off. And that's kind of where I just kind of decided to stop. What I think it is it's the props. They're super flexible, maybe the most flexible I've felt, at least in some time. They're Gemfan branded, so I don't know that I've flown a lot of the Gemfans. I think we started out when we were using this sort of prop with the King Kongs, but I just think there's too much weight for this flexible prop. I do think a better alternative is to use a stiffer prop. Unfortunately, it has to be a push-on prop because the motors do not have any motor holes for mounting props. I have a bit of a concern that it might be from the TPU canopy as well. It feels solid in there. It might be a compounding effect where it's the props and it's the canopy making things even worse. I think if you fly less aggressively, you'll have less of these problems, but that's not my style. I want to go out and have fun, and I'm trying to have fun even with the bobble on the camera. It actually made it a little bit difficult with all the movement, actually holding any sort of precise line. Another concern I had was about the frame, and that maybe the geometry with the support arms was causing a problem. The twig kind of made that popular, and the twig formula seems to be working out great. I have yet to hear anybody talk about the twig and having any sort of aerodynamic problem in tuning with the frame, so I'm leaning away from that, but maybe there's something that Brian has figured out with the geometry of the support between the arms that makes it work. I don't know, but it's something I'm throwing out there. I think there's very strong possibility that it's the props. I wish I had warmer weather and I'd slap on some of the new Gemfan tri-blades and give them a go, although I think a tri-blade on 1103 is a little bit of a mistake. It's really going to reduce your pop at the bottom, and it's probably not going to reach the top end very quickly, so your punch outs will be much more muted. You'll probably hold better in the corner, but I think that tri-blade's probably going to turn an 1103 motor into a little bit of a cruiser. That's not really what I think this one is designed for, and it's certainly not the type of fun I like to have, so I stuck with these props trying to fly it hard. Spent a lot of time tuning. I'll put my PIDs on screen in case you do have one and you want to give these PIDs a try. Again, I would suggest a stiffer prop, but it's got to be a push-on prop. There are some other deficiencies with the motors I want to alert you to. So before you leave, I know most people only watch the flight videos and then they go on about their business. I'll cover the motors right away, and it's going to be fairly important because I think what you're going to find with these motors is you're going to have a lot of stems breaking. And because you don't have screw holes to mount props, you're down a motor. You break a stem, you're down a motor. There's nothing you can do about it. I don't believe any of these little motors are being sold, except for maybe the Diatones and the Happy models are selling bells. All the other manufacturers I don't think are selling the bells, so you have to buy a whole new motor if you break the stem. And I think breaking the stem is actually quite likely because of the length of the stem. I think it's cut to the wrong length. These motors look just like those motors that Pyrodrone was selling for a while, back when we were trying to run those 5 amp Happy model boards on kind of at toothpick class as it kind of took off, and then the boards were popping. Turns to find out that the KV was much higher than advertised from the manufacturer. So whoever made those motors probably is making these motors. I'm not saying there's anything wrong. I just don't like the stem and the fact that there is no opportunity to put on props that require screws, because you just don't have that opportunity. Otherwise, the machine is pretty fun if you put away the fact that it bobbles all over the place. It actually flies pretty well, and it flies for quite a while. Now, I've gone way past where I should. I forgot to change the OSD, and you see I come in and I land, and my battery is fairly low, but as we go back to the screen, we can see that it recovers okay. The battery's probably not damaged from my flight, so my flight probably should have ended at, say, 355. So hopefully you can see in there. My concern is this is a really long stem for a push-on prop. It's a really bad design in my opinion, because when you hit up here, that's a whole lot of leverage it's got all the way down on that stem, clear down to the base or the top portion of the motor before it gets any support. So if you have crashes where it hits up here, which is probably going to happen quite a bit, right? Most of the time when we crash, we hit the motors, at least at some port of the crash. If we're tumbling or doing cartwheels across the yard or the asphalt, the motors have got to be hitting, and this is probably going to be one of the first things that hits. If you're flying straight forward and you hit a tree, that's going to be one of the first things. Let's see, depending upon the angle, you have to be just cruising, and then you might not have enough inertia to do any damage if you run into, say, a house or something flat or a tree. But if you're flying very fast, the motor stems are going to be the first thing that hit. Of course, then there's all sorts of bad luck crashes. But so that's one thing I think it's important to note, is that I think you're going to be breaking motor stems quite a bit. And as I pointed out, there are no holes for mounting props to it, so they have to be push-on props that you're using. Otherwise, I like a lot of what they did, really. I'm not familiar with this board, but I didn't have any problems with it. I pushed it pretty hard. This canopy, it's a canopy we've seen all sorts of times on Thingiverse, and I've printed a few myself. I think this was from the Pickle, I think. Now, I can't remember for certain, but I think it's a Pickle. It comes in a few different designs, but this is pretty classic design that we're seeing nowadays. The camera does not have hardly any camera angle. You can't hardly move it in there. So if you want to stick with this canopy and you want more or less camera angle, you can take your soldering iron, warm it up, and then just kind of ream that stuff out. No, it's not pretty, but it's dirty, and it gets the job done. If you want it to be pretty, you're probably going to have to print a different canopy, which there are all sorts of canopies you can print, and there are print services that you can use if you have a need to hire that out if you don't have a printer or a buddy with a printer. They also put a cap down here, so I applaud them for that. That helps to clean the video feed. It also kind of minimizes any sort of voltage spikes you might be getting. Also, it's secured down. Hooray! Somebody else secured down the battery lead. I would like to see a little bit more slack between the solder pads and where it's secured down, but at least they took the time to do that. I'd like to see just a little bit of wrinkle, and we see what they've used, the fancy tape that I'm always touting about. This is going to come up in another video where someone didn't use, well, they used tape, but it's the fabric tape. In this case, they use the tape that I do like. Obviously, we're using motor plugs, so if you tumble through a tree, there is a little bit of slack. A twig could get in there, and that could cause a problem getting it down, but you can say the same thing for all these other holes as well. And yes, the receiver that I didn't cover, it's the FrSky XM Plus, and it does come with these all mounted up. You don't have to do anything. It's all set and ready for you to go. I'm not crazy about this. It kind of flops around, so there is an opportunity in an extreme and rare case that it would take a hit, but you can see my antenna is clean, so it did not take a hit. My personal thing would be to just take my soldering iron again and poke a little hole right in this little fin, and then take a zip tie and secure this up to it right like this. Maybe down a little bit. Yeah. So somewhere in there, I'd poke a little hole and use a zip tie to secure that. That's a better position, and it also keeps it out of the props for sure. Now, they use button head hex screws on all four motors, so that's a good spot. Yeah, I like when they use the same screws. We've got the similar screws over here, although I think these are 1.5 and these are 2s, so minor difference there, but I don't have a problem with that. The screws that go through the stack are metal. You can see they have a nut at the very base. Let me get my pointer out. So we've got a nylon nut here. We've got rubber mounting here for soft mounting our flight controller, and then you've got another nut up here. Oh, mine's loose. Must have wiggled loose a little bit. So, this is the way you want to do these sort of things. You want to secure the screw down to the frame. You want to make sure this stays tight, and then some soft mounting for your flight controller. That's always helpful. And then you want to have another nut on top, and then you screw this all into the canopy. Now, this is a pain to put back together. I've done this a bunch of times. So when you have this done, as I see it as right, it's actually also a lot more difficult or time-consuming to work on. So there's a yin and a yang to that. I prefer that they do it this way because I would rather have it stay together well than to break and really have to get in there very often. It does come with the receiver mounted down here just like this, and you can see the bind button. Where did that go? I think it's right over here, isn't it? Yeah, it's right out over here. I did not have to remove the canopy or anything. Can you see that right down in there? The bind button is right down in there. I did not have to remove the canopy in order to bind it to my radio. So while they did a lot of things right, it's got a lot of bobble in the FPV camera, and I'm not a fan of the length of the motor stems. And I always like to have that backup opportunity to using different props that do screw on to the motors, and we don't have that chance here. So what do you think? Am I crazy? Am I all wet? Do you want me to put on some different props and show you this in, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks to see if maybe I get some good weather? I could try some different props, see if it straightens out that bobble in the FPV feed. If you'd like to see that, leave a comment down below. Otherwise, if you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in that section down below. I appreciate your time. And thanks for watching.